Hello and welcome to another edition of Fridays with Phil. I'm your host, Philip W. Dunn, the program manager here at USBC. On behalf of our president, Ron Busby, our board, and our staff, I want to thank you all for registering to attend and for your continued support of USBC. Now, before we begin our program, I want to remind you all to continue to register for our webinars at usblackchambers.org/webinars. And be sure to register your business at buyblack.us. Now, today I have the esteemed honor and the privilege to host this very special guest, John Templeton, the founder of National Black Business Month. Mr. Templeton, how are you today, sir?
I am doing fantastic.
Great, great. Well, let's get started. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you began National Black Business Month?
Well, I am part of a family that has been continuously in business since 1820, 2 centuries. I had a chance to trace my family history back to Songhai Empire and to a chemistry professor at the University of Gao in the 1400s. So a lot of what we're doing during National Black Business Month is to change the way that we're seen, so that we're automatically not disqualified from being in business because of the myth of absence. So we kind of turn things on the head and start from the beginning and say, well, okay, if we want to talk about who belongs in business, then there are a number of major industries that were started and really seeded by African Americans.
And so with National Black Business Month, as I understand it, takes place in August, and it's 31 days of focusing on Black-owned businesses. Can you tell us about the origins of, I believe you all started 20 years ago. Tell us about the origins of National Black Business Month.
Well, Fred Jordan and I have worked together for 30 years. We were the leaders of the campaign against Ward Connolly in 1996 for Prop 209. And so we're always looking for ways to change the way that Black folks in business are seen. So in 2004, he said to me, well, I don't have any data on Black businesses. And I said, well, it doesn't exist because the federal government during the Bush administration stopped doing the census of minority businesses. And he said, well, that's why you need to do it. And so I figured out that the Social Security Administration, as part of its actuarial tables, had to calculate how many self-employed Black folks by state, by sex, every year. So we actually had better data than the census. And so for the next 10 years, our State of Black Business report was the only way that you could actually find out how many Black businesses there were in the country. And so in the first report, which is called Loaded Dice, I decided we needed to change the brand identity of African American businesses. And because my day job is being a historian, and I actually covered the announcement of the first Black History Month in 1976 when I was White House correspondent for the Afro-American. So I knew the mistakes that had been made with Black History Month. And I said, well, how do we create something that can't be co-opted, that actually moves us ahead? And so we created National Black Business Month as a psychosocial intervention to actually scientifically create change. And so we flipped the script by creating an index where we rated the states based on our 10 key factors for Black business success. And so rather than them, coming out and saying what they're doing, they said, no, we're telling you what our evaluation of you is. And this is the number that you have. Well, of course, state governors, they compete. So when, Virginia gets a higher score than Maryland, the girl in Maryland saying, why, why did they get that higher score than us? And so we've seen a very sharp improvement in the scores that we were getting just by the fact that we were evaluating. And so we've kept it independent and scientific so that we can say, okay, this is our assessment of what you're doing for Black businesses, and really to even keep it nonpartisan. For most years, out of the top 10 businesses, top 10 states, 5 are Republican or 5 are Democrat. So there's really been no correlation between party affiliation of the governors and our rating. So we've been very strict about, we use the same criteria every year until this year. And a little bit later, I'll talk about why we changed this year.
Oh, well, I definitely appreciate that history. And there were several nuggets that, just kind of stood out from what you just shared. Chief of which is that initially there was no data measuring the number of Black-owned businesses, and you all went in and harvested that data. And now we have, we're in a position to where we can share information on the state of Black business on an annual basis. The other thing was that now we can take a look by state to see how well these states are performing in ensuring that they have a select number of Black-owned businesses. Like you said, it's nonpartisan and it's objective. It's based on data. Talk about data for a second. Why is it important to have this data when we talk about Black-owned businesses?
There was a study done through history that oral societies almost always fall to literal societies. Even when the oral society is bigger and stronger, has more weapons and all that sort of thing. So who writes the story always winds up as the winner, even if they lost.
Right.
And perfect example of that is the Civil War. I mean, the South lost the war and won the history. Right. So African Americans are free, which in and of itself is just a miraculous thing to say, given how we started out here. But we are free because we created our own data and our own narrative. So we were in slavery for 207 years before the first Black newspaper. And we were only in slavery for 35 years after the creation of the Black press. And so that has to be extended into research data, sociology. W.B. Du Bois was the father of sociology. So when we generate our own data, then we're able to change the narrative and to get better outcomes.
Wow. See, I love that because I agree with you in that, you do better once you know better. And the fact that we can use data to drive change is critically important, especially for our community when we know that change is so badly needed.
Yeah. And the other thing about data is it eliminates debates. So I'm the author of a trilogy on the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. I'm National Park Service subject matter expert on African-American history in the West. So during Juneteenth, we had people saying that the reason for Juneteenth was because people didn't know about the Emancipation Proclamation. But in actual fact, Juneteenth was a celebration of the 25,000 US troops of African descent who occupied Texas. And so this is the map of the 14 regiments that were in Texas beginning in 1863. So if people didn't know about the Emancipation Proclamation, how do you explain, the fact that the 1st Engineers, 19th Infantry, and the Corps d'Afrique were in Brownsville, November 1863, or the fact that Galveston was in Union hands on January 1st, 1863. So just talking about things not only doesn't move you ahead, but it leaves you vulnerable to misinformation.
Right. Spot on and perfect example there, one that ties right into our community, our history, and our heritage. Now, when I think about, in particular, National Black Business Month, I know that you have in the next month or so, you're going to have some events that are going to be taking place, and you're going to have some resources and information that you'll be sharing with the community. Can you tell us about some of those events, some of the resources and information that you'll share during National Black Business Month?
Well, every year, we literally have not changed our practices from the first one. So we do 31 ways, 31 days, and we have a nightly program at 7 p.m. And each day we focus on a specific industry because we want to change people's perspective on what a Black business is. For instance, the largest number of Black businesses are in healthcare. 5 times more than in food and accommodations, which people normally think, or 3 times more than in personal care. And so this is significant because with all the healthcare spending that's going on, particularly in the pandemic, this is our way to actually increase employment in our community. So I spoke last year before the COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force and said, wait a minute, you have 30 million Black folks who are unvaccinated. Why don't you hire Black businesses to do that? And so Ron actually connected me with Colleen Payne in Tulsa, who we were able to help move to Texas and to open a 100 employee facility. And if we could do that in 20 more states, and she has a national license, we would create thousands of new jobs for African Americans. So we're looking at cybersecurity, we're looking at life sciences, we're looking at financial services, we're looking at venture capital, all those different things that African Americans are in that nobody knows about.
Awesome. And the Ron you're speaking of is our president at USBC, Ron Busby Sr., who connected you with an entrepreneur, Black-owned entrepreneur, who then was able to go out and create these job opportunities, right?
Yeah. Also, this year starts with our Black Bio 100 on the July 27th, and we're honoring a Dallas couple, Dr. Edelisa and Marcus Martin, who just acquired a company in San Francisco, which is venture funded. So you have a Black company acquiring a white technology company in San Francisco. So we're honoring them on the 27th at 5 o'clock Pacific time, and we encourage people as part of their purchase of our State of Black Business report, which is down but not out, State of Black Business 19th edition. You get access to all of the programs, 31 Ways, 31 Days. And because we created a Dr. T. Nathaniel Burbridge Center for Inclusive Innovation, we're going to continue to be doing these programs all year round. So it's a year-round opportunity to get competitive knowledge, so that you can win in the marketplace.
So that's awesome. And we'll be sharing these informations and bits of resources that Mr. Templeton is sharing with us as well. So we'll make sure to get that information out to our audience as well. Now, I do have another question, and it's specifically targeted towards our community. And I'd like for you to share with us what is it that you want Black people to know about the importance of supporting Black-owned businesses?
Well, our theme this year is our votes are our venture capital. As I discussed last week at the US Black Chambers, Ron and I and Antoine and Amy and a bunch of other folks, we started something called Black Wealth 2020 in 2014. And we're trying to figure out how do we actually solve the problem. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it. How do we actually fix the problem? And more importantly, how do we know when the problem's fixed? I mean, we spend so much time, complaining about things that are happening to us that, in 2014, the Michael Brown situation happened, and you had people out in the street, and they would put a microphone in front of them, and they say, "What do you want?" And they were like, it's like I'm just protesting, right?
Right.
So we said, well, so with I developed our 10 plan, which is to move African Americans from 6% of GDP to 10%. We're 13% of the population. So we've gone from being 3/5 of a man in slavery to 42% economically. So we just get back to 3/5, we've been making progress.
And that's a pretty profound statement, and we talk about how measurement matters, and these numbers do matter. These percentages do matter. GDP matters as far as the condition of our community. So I'm so glad to hear that you put it in those terms so that maybe we can kind of picture, what our condition looks like.
Yeah. And so our 10 plan is a series of 10% ratios. So if we can take the 3 million Black folks who are in business, many of them who are in business involuntarily, to get 10% of those to have employees. Right now, it's only 3%. So healthcare is one of the prime ways we can do that. So if somebody's a nurse and they're doing a personal care business, but they're doing it by themselves, they hire 4 or 5 more people. That adds up pretty quickly. Also, professional science and technical services is the largest employer among Black businesses. So the more contracts those folks get, the more they're able to hire folks. So if we can move that number from 135,000 to 350,000, that's 2 million new jobs. Ends the unemployment disparity. And one of the things that we noted in this year's report is that in most industries, the percentage of African Americans has been declining, even though the Black unemployment rate is at its lowest level. The actual better paying jobs, the percentage of African Americans in those jobs, has been declining in the last year. So we've seen an economic boomerang since George Floyd, where for a year after George Floyd, things seem to be improving. But in the last year, things are plummeting. So for instance, in hospitals, there are fewer Black folks working in hospitals this year than last year. And how could that happen in the pandemic, right? So we've been moving to places like retail sales. So basically all of the essential jobs that put us at risk, we've been growing in those: warehousing, retail sales, and things like that. But in the higher wage jobs, our numbers have been increasing. So one of the ways to fix that is more contracting, more growth among Black-owned businesses, because then we decide who gets the management jobs, who becomes the vice presidents, who becomes branch managers, that sort of thing.
Perfect. I couldn't agree with you more on that. You know, we have to become the decision makers and not the ones dependent upon the decisions being made. And so it leads me into this next question. You know, throughout the year, outside of National Black Business Month, what are some things that Black consumers can practice throughout the year to support Black-owned businesses?
Well, our consumer part of National Black Business Month is for folks to visit a Black business every day of August. And so the psychology behind it is it takes 6 weeks to form a habit. So if you do this for 31 ways, hopefully you will continue doing it the rest of the year. So when I landed back in San Francisco, first place I went was to Red Bay Coffee, which is an African-American coffee manufacturer. So they have a plant in Oakland, and then they have 2 retail facilities, one in Oakland, which is about a block from where Oscar Grant got shot, the Fruitvale Station. And then they have one in the prime retail location in the Ferry Building in San Francisco. And so this is a Black-owned business that is adding, dozens of jobs by going into manufacturing. They're importing the product from Africa, dealing directly with African farmers. So basically, all the things that you wanted to see happen in terms of, our economic diaspora, they're doing. So if I want tea, I'm going to make sure I go by them to pick it up. Also, we created the African American Freedom Trail in San Francisco. And so we do tours of Black historic sites. So one of the things we're advocating is that every city make sure that the African American historic communities are on the National Register. That way you can protect them from gentrification. I'm chairman of the Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation in New York City. And we just opened the Shirley Chisholm Park, 400 acres. And it opened right before the pandemic, so nobody really knows it's there. So when you create those public preservation markers, then tourists can find them, and we can generate the kind of traffic that keeps businesses going.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that we're talking about habits and how our community, the communities change when the individuals in the communities change. And so if we all start to practice these habits, all 13% of us start to behave in certain ways, and we start to go and visit Black-owned businesses at least once a day, then we can start to see our dollars shift from the places where we currently spend to the dollars shifting to our businesses in our community. So I'm so glad to hear that it's a very practical thing to do. And I think that everyone can do this, not only our community, but others as well who want to participate in helping to change the condition of our community.
Yeah, a good analogy is Kwanzaa. So we basically use the methods of Dr. Karinga, where he has a set practice. Everybody has to do the same thing. So Nguza Saba, everybody says Nguza Saba. Well, we're putting everybody on the same page and it doesn't even matter if we get millions of people to do it, because what we're focusing on are the opinion leaders. So, I often tell people there's only about 10,000 people who matter, right? If we get those 10,000 people doing something, everybody else is going to follow them, right? And so the chambers are a perfect way to galvanize the people that everybody else is following. So if your chamber president makes a point of eating at a Black restaurant every week, for instance, good example, Al Sharpton, whenever he meets with somebody, he says, come to Sylvia's. So just little things like that. And that's what is a big part of the psychosocial intervention. It really doesn't take big stuff. Nobody
Right.
has to go out of their way. If we get 10% of our businesses that have employees, if Black folks decide to spend 10% of their income with Black businesses, if the capital at our African American banks grows to 10% of our income, our banks have capital about 7 billion. Latino banks have 150 billion. Asian banks have 150 billion. We get to 150 billion, then we have access to all the home ownership and business lending that we need. And that's something we can do ourselves. And it's very important, not only psychologically, but politically, for us to do it ourselves, because then all the other entities in society, we can say, we support ourselves. We think we're valuable. So you should too. So we can't argue with the federal government for spending 1.7% of procurement with Black businesses when we don't spend 2% of our money with Black businesses.
Right. Spot on. And I think that there's something there that we can all latch on to, pick up and carry, because I think that once we start developing that momentum, I think it'll be unstoppable for our community in changing our condition. And you are right. We don't need everybody to do this. We only need a small number of folks to lead the way, and others will become the first followers to latch on to this. So I definitely appreciate
always
that.
Use crisscross as the example. They
Yes.
started wearing their pants backward, and everybody wore their pants backward.
Right.
So it doesn't take a lot of early adopters, as the video that Ron showed at the beginning of saying. You just need one person to do it and keep doing it, and then eventually people say, "Well, why is he doing that?" And give you a perfect example. And I showed this during the program. This is my figures phone. Only domestically made smartphone in the United States, manufactured by a 32-year-old Black man in Florida, and he has his own wireless service. So politically, just imagine the impact it will have if a significant number of African Americans during August change their service to buy this phone manufactured by a Black man, to be able to call and to get your service from a Black-owned company. So, and it comes in this box, and there are people who do ceremonies around opening the box from Figures.
Mm-hmm.
That's how spiritual an experience it is. So just imagine every time you pick up a phone and call somebody, it's like, I'm using a Black-owned product on a Black-owned telecommunications system. Just imagine how that makes you feel.
Yes. And you mentioned that you were at our conference at the USBC National Conference and School of Chamber Management.
And I got more questions about that phone than anything else.
And I was so glad that you did that. It was a great way to really, sort of show how we can, really walk the walk when it comes to supporting Black-owned businesses. And one of the things that you talked about there at the conference was you talked about the state of Black business. I wonder if you could share, if you could dive into a little, maybe one or two of the top bullet points of the state of Black business right now impacting our community today.
Well, we're announcing our Roy Clay Technology Pinnacle Award. So, we selected our 10 to a billion, because we picked 10 companies we want to take to a billion, because our research shows that there's much more benefit from taking a $10 million company and turning him into a $100 million company than trying to generate a bunch of 100,000 companies. Because if you grow, say, 10 anchors in each major metropolitan area, the smaller businesses are going to come from them. But if you start with small businesses and don't have employment anchors, they're not going to make it because nobody makes enough money to support them.
Right.
And that's been the mistake that we've made in Black economic development for the last 40 years. So we're really kind of focused on creating large Black businesses. So we have a company, Mathematical Modeling, Inc., that has created a 13.5 million bit encryption. So the industry standard is 256K. So we have another company, Fortress Secure, which has a encryption envelope that protects your data in the cloud, so that the cloud providers can't look at your data. So so we're really focusing on African American innovators and manufacturers because those are the companies that are going to be able to create the factories to put our people to work. I met with Blondell Pinnock, who's the new CEO of Bed-Stuy Restoration. They're getting ready to transform Restoration Plaza, which is the first community development corporation, into 900,000 square feet of office and innovation space. I said, well, who are you going to get in there? Well, we don't know yet. So the only folks that are going to relocate into Black communities is going to be Black companies. So we need to create large Black companies that are operating on an international scale. And so during our 31 Ways, 31 Days, we not only have federal agencies who are going to be discussing the 90 racial equity plans that they just announced, but we're also going to have trade and industry ministers from a number of African and Caribbean countries, because the way for our businesses to get big is by servicing the needs of the diaspora. ECOWAS, which is the regional West African economic bloc, population is 350 million, same as the United States. So we can try to beat our head against the wall against barriers here, or we can grow where the market is looking for us. And so it's important for our businesses to be part of the revitalization of Africa, part of the revitalization of the Caribbean. And now we have the single market economy in the Caribbean, and we have Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. A lot of the difficulties with doing business in the continent are lessened. So it makes sense for us to be on the leading edge in that. And we will see corresponding political benefits because most of the minerals in the world are in Africa. When people decide they don't like Black people, we can just say, you mean all Black people? You mean the Black people with diamonds? The Black people with chromium that use in the Black people who grow coffee? You mean you don't like them either?
Right. Wow. Well, I tell you what, Mr. Templeton, this has been a very informative session, and I certainly appreciate it. I do have one more question for you before we close out. I wonder if you can tell us where we can find more information on National Black Business Month and your upcoming plans.
Okay, so go to blackbusinessmonth.com and make sure you order Down But Not Out, State of Black Business 19th edition. And at the beginning, it has the explanation and the rules for National Black Business Month. And we've talked about 10 chambers since last week. And so wherever we have chambers that have at least 20 people with the book, so they don't have to go through the grilling that I put everybody through last week, so that they're on the same page as I am, we will set up a 31 day schedule for that market of activities and literally show them how to systematically support the businesses in each market. A good example is Portland, where they read about us, and it was actually a white gay woman who read about us in the San Francisco Chronicle, and she went out and found the 70 Black restaurants in Portland, which is a lot of people call the whitest city in America, right? But they got 70 Black restaurants. Wow. So on our Black Restaurant Day during National Black Business Month, they had 6,000 people for the last 8 years go and visit those Black restaurants in Portland. So it's not just a esoteric thing. Once you bring it down to the local level, you actually see benefits, and difference between those restaurants hiring an extra person is the business they get that weekend. And you create the habit where people like the food and they say, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna come back and do it again." So, and one of the things that we also have a page on the site, Direct to Black, because it's important for African Americans to be able to go directly to the Black business and not have to go through a bunch of ads for other stuff and that sort of thing. So on our blackrestaurant.net page, we have located the websites for the restaurant, not the websites for the delivery service. Give me the website for Sylvia's, right? Give me the website for Red Rooster, because that's the one nobody's taking 40% out of the order or anything like that. And so our Direct to Black takes you directly to the Black business, so that all the money you spend is going to them.
Wow. Mr. Templeton, so very appreciative of you gracing us with your time today, your presence, your wisdom, your knowledge. On behalf of our president, Ron Busby, as you know, our board and our staff, I want to thank you for being here today, being a part of Fridays with Phil at USBC, and also our national conference as well. And we look forward to doing more with you and your organization in the future. And to our audience, I want to make sure that you all watch and share this video and share the message of National Black Business Month, founded by none other than Mr. John Templeton. Any last words before we go, Mr. Templeton?
Well, like I said, you can follow the news all year round at blackmoney.com. This is also the launch for our instructional network reunion. And so we're addressing the curriculum needs of learners of African descent at reunionnetwork.info. So we just want to let people know that we're very close to the promised land that Dr. King talked about. And it's really about information and implementation.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Templeton. Thank you to our audience for watching. I want you all to have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday on Fridays with Phil at USBC. Thank you.